Ďakujem veľmi pekne.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Vám poviem, čo som vlastne
Before
zahral.
telling you what I have played and why I have opted for this piece of music, I would like to say that I'm entrusted to welcome a very important guest and guests on behalf of the Central European Forum, namely Andrea Pukova and Marta Šimečková. So at this very ceremonial moment and at this very important meeting, I would like to welcome our president, ZUZANA Čaputová, Professor Tomáš Halík, and Mr. JACQUES RUPNIK. To start with, I choose three pieces, a Jewish prayer, my own composition, because they are going to talk about what we can trust, whom we can trust, and what to start with if facts do not hold any longer. And I would like to finish with Bach's Preludium, who I believe is a universal composer and musician. There are many musicians who do not believe in God, but there are, I don't know any who wouldn't believe in Bach. So at this moment, I would like to give the floor to them, and I would like to welcome on the stage Madam President, Mr. Halík and Mr. Rupnik. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to have this opportunity and welcome and moderate a discussion between two guests whom you know very well, so no longer introduction is needed. Mrs. President Čaputová and Tomáš Halík. Madam President joined politics from civic society to somehow renew trust in public governance, in engagement in governing public matters, and Tomáš Halík earned the trust of believers as well as of a broader audience through his essays and preachers at San Salvator's church. And then Voltaire's like skeptic who is disappointed at today's society, the society of distrust. And before we get involved in our discussion, there are several topics we would like to discuss, but before that, perhaps for our audience and for me personally, it would be interested to know how the two of you met, how the president and theologian and Catholic priest can get engaged in a dialogue, and I was told that this is not the first opportunity for you. Good evening. Likewise, it's a great honor to accept the discussion at this invitation at this discussion and to meet Tomáš again and you as well. I have known you obviously for many years. You always served as a source of inspiration, and personally, first we met before the presidential election, and I still recall the meeting. It was a very brief encounter of like-minded people, at least that's my impression. And since then, we have been in contact by emails, letters, via the telephone, and so on. And I appreciate those communications because the role which I have been occupying for a short period faces many dilemmas, crucial moments, and it's good to have a support through a person who is very wise, with whom I can share my questions, dilemmas. So that's my encounter and meeting with Tomáš Halík. I would like to make it light. Our latest personal meeting happened when ZUZANA was in Prague, and we went to a jazz concert in Kampa. There were some people standing around, and one lady was there with a small child and took the child to take a picture with the president, because the boy will show the picture, will keep showing the picture for many years. And the president was astonished how swift I was with holding the child, and I thought I baptized so many children. So our very first meeting, as Madam President mentioned, was shortly before the election. One Catholic archbishop, Slovak Catholic archbishop, in a televised Mass mentioned a name of a person, that if you elected that person or voted for that person, you would commit a crime and you would end up in hell. And I said, no way. He violated rules which in our Catholic teachings, teachings clearly say that you can appeal to citizens to comply with their citizens' obligation, but specifying whom to vote for or for whom not to vote, it was not ethically wise. So I think it was a sort of discreditation of the Catholic Church. And then I thought it was not very gentlemanlike gesture. And I consulted my idea with several friends of mine in Slovakia, and they said, yes, come to Slovakia, you have so many fans, readers here. So I traveled by train in the morning. I bought a bouquet of roses, gave it to Madame ZUZANA, apologized on behalf of the Catholic Church, and we spent an hour talking about many things. And it confirmed what I felt from the very first moment of our meeting. Spiritually, we have some tentacles feeling it. Madame Zuzana is a spiritual person who meditates, for whom the spiritual area is extremely important. And so we do understand each other in this area, obviously in the political area as well, because for me the civic area is not something alien. So since then, from time to time, we maintain some sort of contact, and I appreciate it very much. I don't know whether you want to add anything to that. Perhaps I could mention that it's clear that voters did not obey the recommendation of the Catholic hierarchy. And it shows that the matter of trust is not a question of hierarchy within an institution, but it's a matter that forms within a society. And during the pre-election campaign, Madam President managed to persuade even Catholic voters. And I realized that maybe even that was the reason, one of the reasons that this is something even Pope Francis felt. Nowadays, no European leader is closer to the Pope than ZUZANA ČAPUTOVÁ. That's my impression. And that he opted for this long and important trip to Slovakia. I think it was not only her charm, but also her spiritual radiation that impressed the Pope. It's interesting that Christian values are often referred to by many people in politics. Even in the neighboring countries, there are several politicians like that who refer to the Catholic values, and Pope Francis didn't listen to those. And during the trip to Slovakia, he paid attention to Slovakia and to the president. Obviously, we are pressed for time, but after what we have experienced in the last 18 months, I have to start with the question of trust in the pandemic times. During the first period, politicians, the first period of pandemic, the first wave of pandemic, politicians were always accompanied by a doctor, expert, scientist, and so on, as if their lack of trust was to be compensated by scientists, doctors, whom society should trust in. And at least in the Czech Republic, during 1 year, we have had 5 ministers of health, and this does not reflect trust in scientists or doctors at all. And now we are at the third stage when we are talking about trust in vaccination and lack of trust or distrust which prevails in our countries as well as in the West. So how would you explain this, that a significant part of our society does not trust in politicians who recommend vaccinations? They even don't trust doctors, experts, scientists who say, yes, vaccination does work.
I think it's a very complex situation which would require more knowledge from different branches of sciences, maybe more than a politician like me can know. What you mentioned was a better stage where you had then politicians accompanied by experts, but we have also seen scenes when they even they wouldn't need any experts, and they didn't listen to them. Today, what I see is a return back to facts and science and experts. Now, this loss of trust, when I campaigned for my office, Yes, we already then talked about this lack of trust in institutions, in politics, politicians. That was also one of the reasons why I decided to run for the office, because I wanted to strengthen the authorities, the post of a president, etc. And in those days, I even couldn't know that there will be a pandemic, which is a test of trust. And what I see today is a new, never-seen phenomenon before, but which existed in a latent form. It is based on the fact, on the situation we have where people don't trust in science and facts, and it, in my view, is linked with social media, social networks. And now we see that this lack of trust can even result in death and killing. So it is not only a sociological phenomenon, no, it is a phenomenon which results in a low number of vaccinated people. Or in January, this January, we were leading in the numbers of deaths per capita. And so I think that we see a link between what sociologists say, that the trust in institutions and politicians is directly proportional to the trust in vaccination and respect for the rules, COVID rules. What will be the next development, I don't know, but I believe that we must take a very responsible position to a phenomenon which is social media and enforcement of law. And because what we see is that we have rules and laws which protect people, but they are not enforced. Social media are not the cause of the lack of trust. It is only a multiplier of mistrust. The roots why people don't trust or believe are very manifold and sometimes shortcuts. What I see is a lack of respect for education. I am a lawyer, and I am a lawyer. I studied, but I am not going to advise a doctor how to treat me, or I am not going to tell the garage how to repair my car. When I go to visit a specialist, then I trust the person, and I hope that he will help me to solve my problem. That is my world. And it is because I know how much effort it cost me to become a lawyer and to be a specialist. So I have now mentioned several shades of mistrust, the causes and the ways how to address this, but we may come back to some of them. So racial and mistrust. I believe in human brain, in rationalism, in ratio. I think it's very precious goods. And I think that it allows us to be critically thinking, self-critically thinking. It gives us a capacity to see things in a larger context. And this rationalism and this trust in brains is a manifestation of a certain trust. But I think there is something like a basic trust which is shaped in the early stages of your life. That is when in the contact with your mother, etc., etc. There is a lot of psychoanalytical work on that. So this will guide you to a certain way of thinking and forming opinions. And our basic attitude to life is being shaped. None of us sees the full reality. Nietzsche says that each view is already an interpretation. Interpretation is not a situation where you watch and then interpret. No, you already watch the world with a kind of interpretation. So people living in Bratislava have a different view on life than people who live in ghettos. People who are socially deprived have a different attitude than people who are wealthy. But the pandemics has hit across all borders. across all strata of society, but the response of people depended on their social and financial situation. For instance, let's take vaccination. I once gave an interview to the Slovak television, and then we had a long exchange with a Slovak priest who believes in disinformation, fake news, and different stories. And I said, okay, so if you don't, I said, if you don't trust science, Pope Francis have said that let's get vaccinated. It is an expression of love and responsibility. If you don't do that, you are almost committing suicide and you are putting others into danger. That is not according to our belief. And you are not believing and trusting our Pope. And then I have read some interviews in papers, and many of the people who would spread fake news deceased, passed away one after the other of those people. And there you have always a witness statement saying that they say, well, it was my mistake that I didn't get vaccinated. Tell people to get vaccinated. But there were also others who didn't believe, but there are many casualties of not being vaccinated. And I sent it to the priest, and he told me that the doctor in Texas says that the vaccination is harmful, etc. So suddenly there is no possibility to have a dialogue. And when I say this, I always remember a story of Slovakia when two foreigners visited Slovak shepherds, and they asked them in German, sprechen Sie Deutsch? Do you speak English? Parlare italiano? Alebo say español? Говорите по-русски? And the two shepherds didn't answer. And the one shepherd tells the others, maybe, John, we should learn some foreign languages. And John says, why? They know 7 languages and it didn't help them. So there is no point in learning it. So that is the same. There is no point telling if they don't want to listen. And then there is another aspect, and that is the fear. Pandemics is about fear, because in a relatively short time there was an invisible threat. We fly into space, we have a lot of inventions and discoveries, and then suddenly we were facing a situation: when are people going to die? How fast? It was a very strong experience, civilizational shock. And there was this fear of losing life, and you have seen, people have seen death close to them. And then there was another fear, that was existential fear. People lost their jobs, income, so they felt threat also in this aspect. And this emotion of fear was very visible in society. And I want to be empathic. I want to understand that there is a group of people who are afraid of vaccine, and I try to be empathic to them, though everybody knows what I think about vaccination. So what I want to say is that there are people around me who are simply afraid, and through this prism they see the information. So they rationally maybe they would understand, but the emotion of fear is strong. And then we have some people who consider it their mission in life to spread fake news and lies. I don't know why they do it. I don't understand it. But what I wanted to say is that it was a strong stroke and strong experience with the emotion of fear, and it may also influence the issue of vaccination and trust in democracy, politics, etc. If I may continue this line of thoughts, you have said that every view is already an interpretation. We could follow that line, but on the other hand, we have also scientific facts which are not interpretation. But of course, the scientists would also have their discussions about the facts. But what I find interesting is the idea that everything is only an interpretation, and that is not something applying only to the pandemics or vaccination. We see it in our societal life as well. What we have now is no facts, but narratives, stories, and everybody is formulating his or her own story, narrative. And when you translate it into the politics, now, do you remember the speaker of President Trump? And if somebody mentioned certain facts, the answer was, but we have alternative facts. So we have alternative facts. But as soon as you have alternative facts, you cannot have a discussion. In a democracy, the basis of democratic discussion is that we at least agree on the existence of certain verifiable facts. And then we may discuss about their interpretation, about their roots or their solutions. But if there is no unity or agreement on facts, then we have only stories, narratives, and they then are living their life in social media, and they are fed with alternative sources of information. And then you see the creation of certain bubbles in society, a very fragmented society, and it's very difficult then to form a consensus on what a democratic discussion should look like. So if we can now speak about mistrust, not only in politics and political parties, but also in institutions, I think there is this very close link, because we have already a story in society, a story that a part of society is alienated from society, and vaccination is only a manifestation of this attitude. Maybe you could elaborate on this, maybe not only on vaccination, but on the broader scope. That is, in fact, something I would call politics of mistrust.
Speaking about objective facts, of course, we could delve into a very long philosophical dispute and discussion. My friend, as a philosopher and scientist, criticized the understanding of simple theoretical facts, and he placed or he underscored interpretation, the angles of interpretation. He understands the subjective attitude to the matters. He puts it into brackets and listens to others. So objectivity is nothing what is given, but we read an article, look at a painting, look at figures. We look at them at an angle. But what we need to understand is that there is somebody whose angle is different from that of us. So we should try to understand, to be in his shoes, to understand why he sees these things in that way. And then let's start embark on a way of discussion. But it's a formative experience, and I quote quite often, when I was a young student and I participated in a meeting of young people coming from different political areas, religious areas and countries, and suddenly I realized that I was with a guy from Africa, and there was a cross on the wall, and I said, I'm so sorry for this man, but the cross evokes a different emotion in him, and this is something that was something I didn't realize. We are used to certain perception, and his perception, his way of looking at the same things is different. There were people from liberation, the movement, you know, it was in 1969, we were completely allergic to that, but I thought, but if I were in Latin America, I I might have a similar view of these things. So we all view things at a certain angle, but what we need is a dialogue and understanding for each other, to understand others why he or she says this. If I were in their shoes, I might have a different view. So this is very important for coexistence in this very complicated world, which through its complexity evokes fear. I would not resignate that there are areas where, because I think scientific community would confer that there are areas which are based on facts, and we have to base on facts, on matter of facts. For example, in law, everybody, who is objective must understand it. For example, in criminal law, if something happens and you need to quantify what happened, we have to have this matter of facts as a basis. But what is important is willingness to reach the truth. And this relates to search for truth, which is very efficient, which can be achieved efficiently through dialogue. I use this simile of, I can look at a cone from the top. I can see a dot, and somebody looking from the side can see a triangle. So looking from different angles gives you different perspective, and only from all the angles you get the bigger picture. So that's a way of searching for truth. In these times, due to the overload of information, obviously closely related to the role of social media, and perhaps due to this overload of information, some people might be satisfied with getting the truth offered, even processed, pre-processed, treated, and this treated truth is easier to swallow. They may get sick afterwards, but it might be easier from the beginning. It might be easier than searching for truth. And I said, okay, the lawyer is talking, but that's good, because in the area of law, obviously, you search for justice based on certain rules, laws, and so on. And it's a very important dimension of democratic life. Many people understand democracy as a rule of majority, sometimes even the terror of majority. But what this aspect of democracy must be offset is the rule of law. And this is the specific area which in many post-communist countries has been omitted, or something, in our country, Klaus used to say, oh, these lawyers, they kept us, they caused delays, And so I'm very happy that we have a lawyer as the president, and we need to take care of democracy that has to be rooted in the principles of rule of law. And it's not a mere coincidence that populists in those countries neighboring to us attack the Supreme Court or the Constitutional Court. They attack the institutions of law because they are afraid that European law would be exercised, because European law somehow corrects matters, and even if people seized very important institutions in those courts, there is still a remedy available. So they are afraid of European law and European institutions, so they are against them, and they refer to sovereignty, but they don't care about the sovereignty of their country. They want to be sovereign in their decision-making without any oversight. So the aspect of rule, democracy, rule of law, the protection of institutions of democracy, especially constitutional court, are very crucial. What is specific for this region is that with regard to the rule of law, there are many legacies in our countries. The legacy of Austrian Empire. Yes, it was rule of law, but it was not our country. At least that was the perception of some part of a society. There was this period of communism, which we have a legacy from, because the law was also used by those in power, and the social capital which was generated, it was generated to avoid law, these are even, corruption, and, the extreme form is the mafia, which is basically based on trust. So the social capital which we inherited from communism has not helped to create trust in the institutions of democratic country. So then the teachings of the 19th century in America say that the civic society, the communities and associations, that this trust in those institutions is important. Institutions are political, the institutions of democratic country. But nowadays, this distrust in institutions and the distrust in the institutions of countries based on the rule of law are typical of Central European countries. Obviously, arguments on democracy are then evoked because we are the voice of democracy. We have a majority in parliaments, which means we can ignore the decisions of courts, of the constitutional court, or even acquis communautaire, European law. So what is Europe based on? On trust. It is based on trust that we all share the same principles of rule of law, and if we get into an argument, we can refer to a court, and we need objective, independent courts to adjudicate. So that's a matter of trust in a country based on the rule of law. So this is something that is typical of this region, in my opinion. So that flagrant violation of law, this very tentacles of mafias culminated in the murder of that independent journalist, and it triggered the wave of what we have now, Mrs. Čaputová sitting with us, being the president of this country. This resistance against what was there, and this call for guarantor or guarantees of law that turned the top levels of European politics, the efforts to exercise and enforce law against different mafias. That's something that drew attraction of other countries to Slovakia. This fight is obviously going on. Obviously, we are experiencing something similar in our country. Some mafias, some businesses pretending to be political parties, believing that they can deceive the country, the European Union. So I think something might happen, the wave of populism. And I think this populism can be considered to be the other wave of pandemic. And it threatens all of us. It puts all of us into risk. After Trump and here after the election of ZUZANA, I now see the elections, the result of elections in my country. I believe that the wave of this populism may go down slightly, but it won't be easy. There are forces which will try to hold. Yes, there are forces with links towards the east. It will be difficult politically, socially. It will be a difficult, demanding political and social fight. For these things to change political, moral climate needs to change. What needs to change is the understanding of the culture of politics. You know, it's not just a political system. It's a type of interhuman relations. It's about the culture of relations between people. That's what the culture of politics is about. And in that respect, I think many other institutions like free press, universities, churches should play an important role. Maybe I could follow up on what you referred to communism. I was a very young person at that time, but I think we agree that trust in institutions did not exist at that time. It was forced trust into institution. Then 1989 happened. In the 90s, there were efforts to build the rule of law based on the Western type of democracies, and in good faith we implemented many new forms and institutions. But personally, stuff like we were not mature enough in the 90s, at the beginning of the 20th century. We were talking about the Judicial Council. You know, there was something good, but there were disciplinary proceedings against many judges, unfair disciplinary proceedings. We were the last performing in the European Union. Now the situation is changing slightly. Trust of people in the judiciary is slightly changing for the benefit of the judiciary, and the institutions representing the rule of law and the enforcement law are getting more stable.
It is because we are a democracy, a young democracy, which doesn't have long tradition in institution and institutional memory, and like long-lasting democracies, we are facing global challenges, pandemic, populism, but we are young democracies, and we have to struggle with it. We have to be at least as successful as democracies which are more stable, where the trust is at a higher level. Furthermore, we also see that countries considered to be the bastions of liberal democracy, and we consider it a matter of course change, and they aren't anymore. And what is the same for all of us, we see this split societies, mistrust of one part to the other. And I think if you take the US, the polarization has never been as strong as it is today. And we see today, and this division line today is the division line of large cities, more open, high level of education, and smaller towns, rural areas. And that is what also the election results show. Take Poland or the Czech Republic. And that's the issue, how to renew trust in society which is fragmented, polarized, where it is difficult to find a common language, because what we are missing is this common denominator. It's not about facts only. It should be a discussion about the same things which we try to resolve together. Honestly, if the question is how to renew trust in society, how to get a society which is more glued together, it's really the highest challenge also in my office. As far as this definition of polarization is concerned, I would rather call it fragmentation, because I think there are so many division lines. And in the past, it was more clear, I think, for Mečiar or against Mečiar or other division lines. But today, my feeling is that there are so many division lines that we have a fragmented society, which is a new phenomenon. Another thought I have is that a part of building trust is to have trustworthy politicians, and that is something that is also concerning me. So what I want to say is that I want to be worth trust given in me by people. I think that is the highest requirement you can put on yourself, how to think, how to act, what to do to keep the trust of people, not to lose that trust. And when we speak about populism, it's a very hard struggle, hard fight, because if we speak about politics, we want to do in a clean way, in a fair way. We keep to facts, but populists live in an unlimited space of lies, so it is not an equal situation. But for me personally, the situation is as such. I know that it is an unequal situation. I face a lot of lies and made-up stories and interpretation what I did and I didn't do. The trust and trustworthiness is very important, not only for me as a person, but it's important for society to keep it together. It has a price, of course. When we spoke about the protection of rule of law, of the constitutionalism, so in my competencies, which I have, and any politician or statesman, if you want to be a statesman, you cannot go below the limits or the borders you should guard. Even if you lose popularity, even if you have to take decisions which are difficult to communicate, but you must believe in that what you do is a protection of constitution and constitutionality. And we have situations like this also in Slovakia. For instance, there was an issue about referendum, and I consulted the Constitutional Court, despite of the fact that I was heavily criticized. I considered it the right step to do, and I think that what I have to do is to act in a consistent way, the best I can do, and be patient and explain in all possible ways, just to try to acquire trust, not because of myself, but because of the institution I represent and the democracy in which I trust.
Tady skutečně jde o tu fragmentizaci společnosti.
Yes, you're right. It's really fragmentation of society. And in our Euro-Atlantic space, it is a phenomenon we see everywhere. I see it in church. In what we see are borders, not among churches, but inside the churches you have religions which show this, and you see such divisions also inside families. Families are fragmented, so it really looks like this sociological model you mentioned, like larger cities, smaller town, more educated people, less educated people, people who travel more and read more, have access to more sources of information, people who are more isolated, and so on. But today we are facing a multitude of worlds. We are in the world of internet. We have dived in that world, and that has changed everything. Many people, younger people in villages, are not so isolated because they are on the web, on internet. And one of the first theoreticians on mass media, McLuhan, said that it will create a global village, but it is not one village today. What we see is bubbles. And the internet is not really connecting people. It is also dividing people. And so this is something we are all submersed in, not only in the political and economic area. All that is linked with globalization. The global world is not only global in economy or in political life or in administration. There are other global spheres like health, because the diseases know no borders. They are global phenomenon. Internet is also a global phenomenon. All people are connected via it. Another global phenomenon is environmental damage. We know that if somewhere a forest is cut, the consequences may be felt in Amsterdam. And there are many global worlds, and there are fragmentations, as you mentioned, let's say fragmented according to generation. It all is linked with how you view your future. Those who have a pessimistic view of the future because they are realistic and watching into their wallets, and they believe that their future will be, and those who believe that their future will be better have different voting behavior in elections. I call current society the post-optimistic society, and the optimism in the form of a naive trust and belief that everything will be better and better, and we have this evidence, technological evidence securing better world, that is dying out. And here I see a place for us Christians or spiritual people, and that is to substitute this lack of optimism with hope. Optimism is the illusion that everything will be better and better, but hope is to be able to survive a situation where everything gets worse and worse. It is an opposite to pessimism. You have a hope, not as an illusion that it will be better, but it is a decision to make it better, to search for the purpose of the things, even though there are some tragical shadows. And I think that is really the role of the spirituality. And when you take this path, then it speaks about the meaning, the sense, the purpose, and people perceive that they are thrown out of the usual concept of purpose. The traditional religions are breaking apart. It is now what we need more today is to modify the basic attitude. Every person has a certain idea how the world should look like, how his or her life should look like, and all this collapsed. The traditional meaning of purpose collapsed, and also the trust in progress and belief born in enlightenment is breaking, collapsing. So this trust that the future will be better, the world will be better, and you see how it's breaking. It was terrorism, now it is pandemics which are hitting it and breaking it, and that is what shakes the trust, and also the trust into the secular purpose And people feel like we have fallen out of a purposeful situation and we are entering an absurd world. So people think that the world is absurd, that they are lost. And then populists come and offer new identities, collective identities, simple answers. They come like Messiah who live on or from the fear, and they support the fear. And that is the situation of today, which is a sick situation which needs to be remedied.
Samozřejmě, já myslím, že tato víra v pokrok,
This belief in progress, I think, if you should trace back where it ended, I think it was 1989, because communism, the communists were the ultimate or caricature of this idea of progress, of scientific progress. I have always said that the communists believe that they know, and the Christians know that they believe. And that's a basic difference. But this idea of hope is a common idea. It's a shared idea. It can be a thought, a feeling, an idea in the Christian world, but also of humanism inherited from Enlightenment period. It doesn't have to be a blind belief in progress. And if we take the environment, that is today the issue which has transformed our old thesis on progress and responsibility. In fact, we talk about responsibility. It is not the Christian belief. It is the responsibility for the world in which we live. Yes, but Slavoj Žižek, a controversial left philosopher, says humanism is not enough. The secular humanism doesn't give enough answers, but the Christian answer is not a simple catechism, but I think it includes also death and resurrection. I think you have to pass this dark night, the death, crucifixion, and that gives a purpose for the road. And the resurrection is, in fact, a transformation. The resurrected Jesus comes as a stranger. They don't recognize him. And I think this is the period in which we live today. What's coming is coming in a new form, and we have to search for it. It is like the injuries showed by the resurrected Christ. So we see the injuries of the world. I have now finished a book which maybe will be published before Christmas, and I work on the idea of the third enlightenment there, enlightenment period. So we had the 18th century, then around 68 was the second period of enlightenment, and it was inspired by humanistic psychology. And now I would say we are in a period of third enlightenment because young people have now this emphasis on environmental responsibility. They want to give voice to those who have no voice, be it nature, be it minorities, sexual minorities. These are the issues young people live on or live with. And Pope Francis has exactly the same emphasis in his encyclicals. He is speaking exactly about these issues. We are not speaking only for our religion, but we speak about the mankind and all human fraternity. We have to learn each other, to know each other, to respect plurality. We cannot come with our vision as the only vision which will be binding on everyone. We have also to look for what is our vision. The belief must have also a certain stage of uncertainty and storage. If somebody says, I met God and this is like this, he said it's a fake prophet, because Moses and Abraham were also exposed to uncertainty and they were searching. And we have to withstand uncertainty today as well. It's a different model than this vulgar Catholicism we knew from the past. Still, we see it reoccurring, but however, I think that the visit of Pope Francis to Slovakia was very important. He mentioned very important issues. First, he visited people at the periphery of society. He visited this Roma neighborhood. He had a speech to the Jewish community. He was also very hard on the local clergy, that you have to educate people to freedom, which is a novelty. I remember a movie about Catholic schools in Slovakia, and the communist period. You have this traditional Catholicism and communists fighting against each other. But there, at the school, there was a specific group of people who were conform, who were afraid of creativeness. They didn't really want it to be free. And people who come with real belief, they will be simply just minced into pieces. And this is what the Catholic Church has to resolve. We have this many sexual assaults and scandals in the church. So we have to come back to the sources of evangelism. We have to renew Christianity as solidarity, exactly, and many other things. As Pope Francis says, that is very important for democracy. For the liberal democracy we want to preserve, it needs a moral vision as well. And I think that in the dialogue, if we have a dialogue with this Francis-like Catholicism, which is different from this Polish national one, that is poisonous. But the one I mentioned
has the dimension of solidarity, the dimension of social responsibility, of environmental responsibility, and I believe this type of Catholicism can be complementary with liberal democracy. This is what we desperately need. Would you like to add something? What you took from Francis Pope's visit? Everybody outside saw the contrast between Pope's visit to Hungary and the Pope's visit to Slovakia, how much time he spent with the Hungarian Prime Minister and how much time he spent with the Slovak President. So what did you take from this visit? First of all, I was very happy that we managed to organize the visit within the scope it was organized, and the moment he stepped out from the aircraft, he said, I promised and I am here. So I was standing there at the airport and I was very happy that it did happen. It was great pleasure to spend moments with this great man alone, to share things with him, to listen to him either at the airport or at the presidential palace, where we had some time to talk to each other. So it was a great source of information, inspiring moments. I asked him about the situation in Slovakia. He follows what's happening in Slovakia, about this dividing lines, the rise of hatred, envy, and he was thinking, contemplating. He exactly understood what I was talking about, because he has the knowledge of different kinds of country, and his teaching is through love. You know, it might be very abstract, but very concrete at the same time. So I took very many specific moments from that. You know, it happened to me in a very specific family moment. I knew it was the last moment, hours of my father's life. I was waving, saying goodbye to Francis Pope, as well as to my father. It was so I was at the very specific life moment, and it encountered and it was at the same time when the Pope was visiting Slovakia. I had to watch the time and looking at Marta, how much time we still have to talk and to share this interesting discussion. Perhaps towards the end we could go back to the question which the organizers raised: what or who we can trust in politics, what to trust, what we can trust in civic society, and what or who we can trust in the Catholic Church. Because nowadays we see that the crisis of trust is also relevant for the Catholic Church. You know, I live in France, and the cause, the scandal, it reflects the crisis of trust within the church, and I believe you have noticed what's happening in France. So there is a crisis of trust within the church, in the politics, and even in a bigger society. We know that our societies are fragmented, and the lack of trust can grow within that fragmented society. So what kind of answers should we search for? There is practically no institution nowadays that could say everybody is discriminated, there is crisis of trust, but we are the only ones who are above it. And obviously I give the floor to you as the last one to close the discussion. What or who we can trust this is something I would like to start with. The first thing that came into my mind when you asked the question, it might sound sentimentally or pathetically, the only thing that keeps me in this period of time is my belief in people. Individually, personally, it's also belief in God, but when it comes to my job, to my function and my everyday work, is hope and belief in people. In this very fragmented situation, in the situation of high levels of destructive mood in the society, we desperately want to move from this situation to something more positive. And we were also talking about destructive forces, whatever form they have. Simply, I may call them envy or the evil. And I believe that you can't fight evil, because if you fight it, you charge it, you recharge it and make it stronger. The only way to reduce it is to spread and enlarge the space of goodness. Here, making people closer, making the human fraternity united. So this is the which also Francis Pope refers to. So we have to join each other on the principles of values. We may have different attitudes, so liberal, conservative, and so on at different matters, but as people, if we can agree on our values, that's the way out from this fragmented society. We need to renew trust in each other, and then renew trust and belief in institutions. Perhaps I can say even more than one sentence. One sentence would be Every crisis is an opportunity. In a crisis, you can go farther, deeper. For example, in the Catholic Church, the crisis of trust is enormous, and what's happening now, and I think it will become even more prominent here, the cases of abuse, not only sexual abuse or misuse, the misuse of trust, psychological manipulation. It's very similar to selling the pardons in the medieval ages, and it led to Reformation. And I think something similar may happen now, leading to a deep reform of Christianity. Pope Francis calls for synody. Let's all of us search for what we have in common. We need to discuss and talk openly. When I was preparing John Paul II first visit, and I got into the discussion of prelates, and one of them told me, everything what you said was right, you mentioned it correctly, but if you want to have a career path in church, you can't show to these people that you are able of your own critical thinking. And I thought, oh, that's a problem. And now Pope is telling us, you all should say what you think, and everybody got scared because that's not what they are used to. And he is saying, tell us what you really think of. So in all these institutions, we need to have this courage to say what we think, what we believe in. And I think Christianity here has a great potential in Hungary as well as here, even to appeal to people outside of the church, but it must be the Christianity of the Pope Francis type. There was a survey among believers indicating 2/3 of believers say we do not find ourselves in what our priests and bishops tell us. So a great change is needed. Slovak Catholicism somehow has not come to terms with the legacy of Catholic fascism. It was in France, in Spain, and so on. Communist approach was single-sided, and after the revolution, it was single-sidedly defended. So there is space, there is room to find a new way of Christianity. Christianity that would be truly open, that would appeal through its principles of solidarity, ethics, and it would appeal through those elements and principles to people outside of church as well. Together we should search for it, and it's not common of churches only. It's not called. It's our common search, common path. We should search for partners. There are many people in different parties, in different types of society, who are able to talk together. We need to renew something what medieval universities had. They were not only producers of diplomas, they were the communities of life, meditation and learning. What we are doing right at this moment, at various places, people need to get together. Together they need to think. That element of contemplation is very important. And then we have to utter, and with the respect, what we think. Others who are different may not be a threat to us, but they may enrich us. And that's extremely crucial for our world.
Ja si dovolím doplniť.
If I may add, you have inspired me to make one remark.
Keď som hovorila predtým o tej
I mentioned this need to be united on values, but I want to add it should be to make it balanced. I am sure that the deficit we have is that the democracy has the right and the responsibility to defend itself. We shouldn't be tolerant to intolerance. That's on one hand. On the other hand, we should get united, as I have mentioned. I think that people who share the same values, we may quarrel, disagree, and we may get divided on things which are not so important, and that makes us really weak facing global challenges.
Váš potlesk je poděkováním našim.
This was our expression of thanks to our
Děkuji oběma za to.
guests to the discussion. Thank you very much for this very exceptional opportunity.
Neviem, či toto ide. Ide. Ja si dovolím ešte na záver zahrať.
At the very end, I would like to play a few tones and give you an opportunity
Tento úžasný rozhovor mohli premeditovať.
meditate through this wonderful discussion, listening to the music. Madam President, Mr. Halík, Mr. Rupnik, thank you very much. First, Mrs. Šimečková and Kuková asked me to say a few words about these personalities, but when I finish playing, you know, my brain works differently, and I would like to say that it was a great pleasure, and as you mentioned, it was a gift for you to spend moments with Pope Francis. It was a gift for us to spend moments with you, not only now and here, but every time when all of you do your jobs, and I would like to thank you for being our president, for being who you are. I appreciate it and hold you in deep esteem. And I'm very happy that with a little bit I could contribute to your campaign at the ZUZANA's concert in Prague, and even on plane board on the occasion of your birthday. Mr. Halík, you don't know it, but I spent a lot of time with you reading your books, listening to your audiobooks, listening to your Sunday preachings, listening to various discussions. Thank you for who you are. You are not only encouragement, but hope for us living a different life than you do. At the same time, I appreciate your language very much. It's understandable in our society. It relates to the topics which we cannot articulate properly. Sometimes I'm able to play it, but often you express it in words on behalf of us. So thank you very much for that. And Mr. Jacques Rupnik, thank you for moderating this discussion in a great manner, and thank you for your insight into our Central European area, which is often deeper than our local insight. You do have understanding, you do understand us even deeper than we who live here, and thank you at the same time for opening new aspects, new connections, new relations. Thanks for your readings, writings, for your philosophical input. Thank you very much. And so I would like to start at the end with Bach, with a few of ideas of mine, 3 in 1, Prelude D minor. I started with a Jewish prayer, and I'm going to finish with a Roma hymn, or anthem.